The first words my stepfather yelled at me were about pulling my weight. I was still in the hospital bed, fresh out of emergency surgery, my body numb, my legs heavy and unresponsive. I explained that I couldn't return to work yet. Doctor's orders, at least 2 weeks. His palm struck my face. The room spun. The cold floor met my skin. Blood filled my mouth. My fingers shook as he growled, "Quit acting so fragile." When officers arrived, everyone looked at him with disbelief. What no one realized was that this wasn't the worst act he'd committed. The true deception had begun much earlier. My name is Emma. I'm in my late 20s, and before that hospital stay dominated everything, I worked retail shifts by day and handled creative side gigs by night. It wasn't exciting, but it covered part of the expenses. More crucially, it kept the utilities running in the home my father had left behind. My biological dad passed away after a prolonged sickness, the type that quietly empties bank accounts, bill after bill, until exhaustion silences any protest. After his burial, the house seemed empty. His coat still draped over the hook. His favorite mug remained unwashed in the sink. My mother attempted to hold herself together, but I noticed how grief curved her posture a bit more each month. That's when my stepfather came into our lives. He arrived courteous, supportive, assured. The sort of man who offered fixes rather than comfort. He claimed he could manage the debts, insisted he'd handle matters so my mother could finally relax. 6 months passed, and they were wed. I recall standing in the living room afterward, observing him haul cartons inside as if he'd always been part of the place. Initially, nothing seemed off. Then minor details began to change. Statements no longer appeared on the counter. Transactions were taken care of. My mother quit reviewing balances because she no longer had to. When I inquired, I was advised not to fret. When I persisted, I was reminded how fortunate we were to have someone ready to lead. Mom grew weary, then absent-minded. She'd trail off mid-thought, gaze at the burner as if unsure why it was lit. My stepfather dismissed it as tension. He placed supplements in front of her each morning, arranged precisely on the counter, and observed until she took them. I continued working. I contributed rent to remain in my old bedroom. I convinced myself this was maturity, negotiation, kinship. Then my appendix burst. The agony hit suddenly and fiercely, doubling me over on the bathroom tiles. Operation came next. When I awoke, my body seemed reassembled against my will. The physician informed me I required recovery time. 2 weeks, no heavy lifting, no employment. That's what I conveyed to my stepfather from the hospital bed. I kept my tone even. I didn't debate. I simply stated the facts. I can't work right now. He regarded me as if I'd offended him. I didn't realize it then, but that instant marked the shift, the point where I ceased being kin to him and became an obstacle. And once I turned into an obstacle, he dropped the facade. The hospital room was overly illuminated for that hour. Pale walls, pale linens, a constant mechanical drone that made moments feel dense and sluggish. I recall fixating on the ceiling panels, tracing the fissures to divert from the ache tugging at my side with every inhale. That's when he entered. No hello, no worry, just the sharp click of the door shutting and his image reflected in the steel cabinet opposite my bed. His mouth was clenched, his stance rigid. The posture people adopt when they've already concluded they're correct. He began discussing finances before reaching the bedside. Expenses, due dates, how obligations were piling up, how I had to contribute my share. I struggled to keep my reply calm when I responded. I repeated that the doctor prohibited work yet. 2 weeks, possibly shorter if recovery progressed smoothly. He chuckled not boisterously, just enough to wound. That's when he uttered it, the phrase that still resonates in my mind during silent nights. "You better start earning your keep." I remember blinking, certain I'd misheard. I was connected to machines. My drip bag released steadily nearby. I hadn't even risen independently yet. I restated myself, gentler this time. I said I was physically unable. His expression altered. It wasn't raging fury. It was chillier than that, deliberate, as if an internal switch had flipped. He bent nearer, hushed his tone, and accused me of faking. Declared I was theatrical. Declared I was frail. Then his palm struck my cheek. I didn't anticipate it. One moment I was reclined against the cushion. The next I was tumbling sideways, entangled in bedding, colliding with the ground. The jolt expelled my breath. Chilled tiles pressed my face. I tasted iron and knew my lip had split. My palm quivered as I attempted to rise, not from terror, from astonishment. He loomed above and snapped, "Quit acting so fragile." That's when the space erupted with sound. Footfalls, calls, someone demanding security. Staff hurrying in, eyes widened, arms already extending toward me. I recall one crouching, advising me not to shift, her tone strained with fury she attempted to conceal. And then law enforcement appeared. They surveyed me on the floor, the red on my gown, the toppled IV pole beside the bed, and the situation transformed. My stepfather began speaking rapidly, justifying, grinning in that narrow, evasive manner he employed when plans faltered. I remained there listening, gazing at the overhead lights, and sensed something within me solidify. That strike wasn't a lapse, it was an announcement, and for the first time I grasped precisely who he was. I was released a day behind schedule, not due to my wound reopening, but because staff suddenly proceeded cautiously around me, as if worried I might break from a harsh exhale. A nurse tucked a small card into my discharge forms while my stepfather disputed parking fees at reception. She said nothing, she simply held my gaze and offered the tiniest nod. I didn't examine the card until evening. The house seemed altered upon return, more silent, more confined. My mother lingered as if scared to make contact, her arms always partly lifted then lowered. She misplaced her spectacles, misremembered the date. She apologized for all things, for sounds, for brightness, for being present. He behaved as if nothing occurred. He prepared meals, he bantered. He recounted a tale about congestion and chuckled at his own ending. When my mother delayed responding, he completed her thoughts for her. When she grimaced, he provided the usual supplements arranged on the counter like tiny guards. I observed. Medication dulled the day's borders, but it honed something else. Trends, sequences. How my mother's disorientation worsened after specific foods. How documents disappeared the instant I mentioned them. Contributions I knew I'd submitted that somehow vanished. The card from the nurse contained a site address. I waited until the household slept. I studied until my vision stung. Economic dominance, health interference, separation. The terms felt eerily recognizable, like reviewing a checklist tailored for us. Days later, a neighbor arrived with broth. She lingered in the kitchen and observed my mother wander by, then bent close and murmured that things seemed wrong. Her daughter was in medicine. She'd noted the containers, the quantities, the changes in my mother. That evening I entered the room he kept secure. The lock was flimsy. The interior wasn't. Files organized precisely. Documents marked with terms like coverage and payouts. I didn't review all. I didn't have to. One sheet sufficed, then another, then more. Plans in my mother's name. Large figures. Timelines that aligned too neatly with her deterioration. My palms trembled, but my thoughts were abruptly sharp. This wasn't disorder. It was strategy. I replaced everything precisely. I retired and gazed at the ceiling until dawn. Dread weighed on my chest, but beneath it lay something else. Determination. I ceased challenging him. I ceased inquiring. I allowed him to believe I remained damaged. And as he eased, certain he'd prevailed, I began silently arranging to conclude this. Once you detect a trend, you can't ignore it. I reviewed everything mentally like surveillance footage repeating. The schedule of my mother's difficult days. How her tremors intensified after morning meals more than evening. How he lingered when she ingested those supplements, ensuring ingestion as if it outweighed all else. I quit viewing it as my existence and began treating it as evidence. Detachment provided lucidity. The initial step was ceasing response. I didn't dispute when he interrupted my mother. I didn't recoil when he barked. I agreed. I remained mute. I shifted deliberately as if still delicate. He preferred that image of me. He confused quiet for defeat. Away from his view, I began linking pieces. I researched identities late at night. Former residences, open records. It didn't require much time to locate the initial woman, then another, then more. Various locations, identical sequence, rapid partnerships, combined assets, abrupt ailments, messy partings. I dispatched one cautious note. No claims, merely an inquiry. Her response arrived soon after, you as well. That instant confirmed I wasn't fabricating. We conversed for hours. Then she included me in a private circle. Women who had all endured variations of my experience. They spoke without exaggeration or rage. Simply details, timelines, records, actions so alike it unsettled me. One assisted in law. Another retained all, every transfer, every message. They didn't direct me. They simply assured me I wasn't isolated. The following element arose nearby. The neighbor's daughter visited one afternoon, ostensibly to assess my mother. She observed silently as my stepfather blended a drink and added substance from an unlabeled jar. Later, alone, she stated she couldn't confirm without analysis, but she disliked the observations, the mixes, the volumes, the signs. It accounts for much, she said gently. That sufficed. I began recording, dialogues, routines, how he readied food, how he demanded managing anything monetary. I avoided his belongings again. I didn't require it. He grew lax now. Assured, he spoke freely on calls, presuming privacy. Then he advanced. He returned one night with a dossier under his arm, beaming like someone who believed victory secured. He claimed it was routine forms. Claimed the attorney suggested it given my mother's recent bewilderment. Power of attorney. Provisional, for precaution. My mother's fingers quivered as she grasped the pen. I sensed something fracture within, but I maintained composure. I posed a basic query. Shouldn't we include a neutral party for such a matter? To ensure accuracy, he paused, briefly, then consented. He said we'd arrange it next week. That week was critical. The women I'd contacted aided in identifying priorities. What carried significance? What violated boundaries? I consulted experts discreetly. Thoroughly. I didn't overstate. I didn't beg. I merely shared reality and presented evidence. They heeded. The strategy formed rapidly thereafter. He declared an evening out for his local group, an event he never skipped. He departed relaxed, jesting, already envisioning gains not yet his. He brushed my mother's forehead with his lips before leaving. I observed his exit and felt only purpose. Half an hour passed, then the bell sounded. Again. Then the home filled with individuals, composed tones, credentials, kind assistants wrapping my mother in outerwear. A health unit posing queries she at last answered lucidly. Containers for files. Equipment gathered, all conducted properly. No yelling, no disorder. Elsewhere simultaneously, someone approached my stepfather. I wasn't present but learned later. How he chuckled initially, how he attempted clarification, how his assurance faded swiftly as it had risen, how the space quieted when they restrained him, how those he'd bragged to moments before distanced themselves, abruptly uncertain they'd truly known him. When he was returned to the residence, it was finished. He beheld my mother seated securely on the sofa, bundled in a throw, replying with sharpness I hadn't witnessed in months. He beheld outsiders removing cartons from his study. He beheld me by the entrance, composed, firm, no dread remaining to mask. For the first time, he appeared diminished. He attempted speech with me, to justify, to negotiate. He insisted I'd misconstrued all, insisted he'd aimed to assist, insisted families resolve internally. I didn't elevate my tone. I informed him truth required no shielding. As they escorted him out, he glanced back once, gaze keen with near desperation. The man who once shouted at me in a recovery bed couldn't summon a single phrase of value. The follow-up progressed swiftly. Examinations verified suspicions. Monetary audits revealed depths I hadn't suspected. More individuals emerged, accounts layered upon accounts until denial had no space. Every effort to shape the tale crumbled beneath evidence. My mother remained under supervision. Within days, her thoughts sharpened. Vitality returned to her cheeks. She wept upon comprehending events, then wept more upon realizing conclusion. The home shifted without him, not noisier, not vacant, simply freer. Neighbors visited, acquaintances absent for years phoned. Women unknown to me expressed gratitude for my voice as it aided theirs. The man who once asserted dominion over our existence vanished into a framework designed for such individuals. And standing in the calm living area one night, amid cartons of proof and the gentle rhythm of my mother resting nearby, I experienced something absent for years. Security, not from his absence, but from recognizing my strength. My mother's improvement wasn't instant, but it was evident. Soon after separation, the haze cleared. She rested fully. She completed thoughts without fading. The perpetual regret in her tone diminished, replaced by firmness, by her essence. Experts described events in cautious, precise terms. They discussed reactions, prolonged impacts, how dominance can erode without visible scars. My mother attended quietly, attentively, then grasped my hand as in my childhood. That minor act felt like reclaiming her. The residence became ours once more. Windows parted. Compartments remained as placed. Statements lay openly on the surface, no longer concealed, no longer enigmatic. It was daunting but authentic. The judicial aspect advanced without spectacle. Evidence spoke primarily. Others appeared, their experiences mirroring ours in ways that pained me. Responsibility arrived not dramatically, not showily, but solidly. I resumed employment gradually, adjusted schedule, shifted focuses. I began assisting, educating, aiding recognition of signals we'd overlooked too long, not from bravery, but from knowing silence's weight. One night, my mother placed a fresh picture in the corridor. Only us two. No captions, no darkness. For the first time in ages, tomorrow felt peaceful in the finest sense. I share this because familial treachery doesn't always appear dramatic initially. Sometimes it appears as aid. Sometimes it sounds like authority disguised as care. And sometimes it requires one instant of insight to alter all. If this account resonated, you're not isolated, and it's not too late to set a boundary. If you've ever needed to shield yourself or a loved one from those nearest, share your experience below and subscribe to stay updated on future accounts.